always seems to cause something of a rumpus whenever he speaks out. Laurence Fox is leader of the Reclaim Party and joins us now. Good morning to you, Laurence.
Morning, Julia. How are you
I'm
doing?
very well. I sound a little less ropey than you do, to be fair.
What's that? Sorry?
I sound a little less ropey than you do this morning, if you don't mind me saying. Someone has been out
Well, you don't
enjoying
smoke.
freedom.
You don't smoke 20 cigarettes a day, so
That
yeah.
that may be part of it. That also being trapped in my home rather ridiculously for the last 5 days, despite not having COVID and not being a risk to anybody. We know that we've got the pingdemic. We know we've got all these self-isolation rules and quarantine rules, all of these things that are affecting our lives. Other than that, largely things are getting back to normal. A lot of people still wearing masks on the public transport or in the supermarket, rather more than I would certainly be hoping, but an awful lot of people who want to reclaim their freedoms have been able to do that. There is a real concern, though, that we're having a few brief weeks or months of freedom, and then it goes away again with the advent of vaccine passports. Very much on the cards, we're told, for big concerts, for sports events, possibly even for university students going into a lecture hall, moving into a hall of residence. We're told, there may even be a move them for pubs and restaurants as well. Why are you so opposed to vaccine passports? Why is that such a big issue for you, if, as many people seem to think, they would keep people safer?
Well, I think it's a fundamental change between the relationship of the state and the citizen, that in order to partake in everyday life, you are going to have to provide proof of the fact that you've taken a medication that the government are mandating that you take, essentially. And that sets a dreadful precedent, I would say. And, doesn't take too much imagination to see where that might lead on to. And the suppression of debate around it, which has been so horrendous, and the total and utter lack of an opposition to any of this is a sort of perfect storm. It's horrendous.
It is extraordinary trying to work out whether there is any opposition to this, other than from, the Liberal Democrats are opposed to it, but they only got a handful of MPs, and of course the COVID recovery group of Tory MPs. But when it comes to Labour, I don't think Keir Starmer knows his view. He has to wait until the next focus group to see whether he is opposed to this on principle or not. But it apparently a very popular move. Michael Gove earlier in the week said he thought that people who didn't get vaccinated, who could, were selfish, and it was a selfish act not to get vaccinated, and it was their own fault basically if they were then excluded from going to a concert, going to a football match, doing other things, that it was their own fault for getting themselves in that position. What about that line?
I just utterly horrendous. Michael Gove to smear again. It's part of the debate. The government have changed track, and I would say lied to us. Nadine Zawi has said to Claire Fox, I will never mandate vaccine passports. So we've been lied to and misled. So you can understand that the millions of people around this country who are just cautious and nervous and they want to take hold the line a bit, are being smeared as selfish by Michael Gove. My question to him is, did you take the vaccine to protect everyone else, Michael, or did you take the vaccine to protect yourself, which is fundamentally, by definition, selfish? But to call anyone else selfish is utterly wrong.
You've chosen not to get the jab. I am double jabbed, but I have said when I got my first jab, I will never show this in my own country. I accept that if I go to another country and they require me to show a double jab status, then that is something I can then choose not to go to that country. Go to that country. I've accepted it with things like a yellow fever jab and Hep B and things like that. So I'm fine. I will live with that. In my own country, to do ordinary things, to go about normal life, never. And if that means I never go to another football match again, another concert again, go to the pub or a restaurant, my God, it's going to be hard. But I think that is a really fundamental principle of living in a liberal democracy. You actually couldn't show a double jab if you chose, because you've not got jabbed. Why did you choose not to get jabbed?
Well, I'm nothing against jabs, actually, the vaccination, and God willing, they will be effective and shown to be effective. But I call me old-fashioned. I quite like to wait until these things have completed their full clinical trials, and we don't have any long-term data on what the effect of these treatments are. So I fully support anyone's right to take the vaccine or not take the vaccine, but I also believe it should be sacred in the way that the ballot box is a sacred place, and it should be private, personal information. And that's what makes us a democratic country. At the moment, we do not live in a democratic country, and they're trying to make us live in an even less democratic country. We're basically China that's where we're heading, where we become organs of the state, not the other way around. The state don't work for us.
Again, we brought this up even with the NHS, so the health app that the government's purporting to want to bring in. Again, very, very sinister in terms of virtue points. And we see that with the social credit system in China. When it comes to vaccine passports, some states in America have, the governors have basically mandated that it is not possible. You cannot require people to show vaccine status, and all credit to them for that. Some states are bringing it in. New York, for instance, has got a big concert. Bruce Springsteen is headlining in Central Park, and you have to be double jabbed to get in. It's not a pilot event, it's just how things are going to be. France, we've seen incredibly strict measures being brought in, even to go to a cafe, a bar or a restaurant, having to be double jabbed. Huge fines, even prison sentences if you as a bar owner or restaurant owner or as a punter go in or allow someone in who isn't double jabbed. Yesterday we saw a violent protest in Poitiers in central France, a city I know well, where people stormed the local town hall and destroyed a portrait of Emmanuel Macron. There's a lot of anger there. We've seen protests across the whole of Europe, indeed, against these moves. They're coming in across the whole of Europe. Do you think the vaccine passports are inevitable and they are going to happen? Or do you think that if people did say a collective no, that they wouldn't happen? How do we stop them from happening if it appears that Labour are too spineless to actually provide an opposition?
Well, firstly, on the France question, the uptake of the vaccine in France is much, much lower than the uptake of the vaccine in the UK. So they're essentially putting, I think it's somewhere around 50%. They're saying 50% of the population. They're dividing society down the middle. I think we need an opposition, and we need a political opposition to this. Even if that opposition is just someone to disagree with, that's the most important thing. We've not had the debate, and the silencing of free expression and free debate has been appalling, and the smearing of people who rightly have a chance to say, look, I'm a bit nervous about this, or for whatever reason someone does it, a pregnant woman, for example, or a woman who wants to get pregnant. This is massively discriminatory, and I think the only thing we can do is it will continue to rise. You see very disappointingly that in London, some of the things that were said at that protests on the last weekend, but the overwhelming majority of the people that go on those marches, which are currently very peaceful, there's a growing anger, and I think the government are absolutely playing with fire.
I agree with you on that, and I just want to bring in actually. I'm not going to name any of the people because I don't ever want to give them publicity, and that's one of the reasons why I don't cover it on my show, because I think these are a bunch of dangerous idiots, frankly, conspiracy theorists and nutters and loons, and I'm sorry they are. And if you think they are, then you're listening to the wrong show, guys, because you're going to hear too much common sense and fact here. But those people have nothing to do with people who are fighting against vaccine passports, fighting against lockdown, fighting for evidence-based liberal democratic values in this country. These are just conspiracy theorist loons and people who compare NHS workers to Nuremberg and things. I mean, I'm sorry, and people being hanged. I've got no time for those people at all, and I know you don't either.
I agree, I think that we do need to keep the language moderate as much as possible, but it's very disappointing that the propaganda arm of the government, the BBC, failed to report the hundreds of thousands of people that marched through London in protest, and instead just ignore them in exactly the same way as someone like Sadiq Khan just ignores the knife crime epidemic and starts talking, building weird Green Mountains.
When it's 100,000 plus very ordinary people who've lots of them. I mean, I went on a march. Lots of people said, I've never been on a march before. There's ordinary families, who've been double jabbed, who just want their freedoms back and want their liberal values back in this country. BBC, Sky, ITV, no interest whatsoever. Get a bunch of loons in Trafalgar Square. Oh yeah, it's all over the news. What a surprise. Well, look, you keep fighting. I mean, you and I disagree on lots of aspects of this, but we agree on some real fundamentals about what makes a country worth living in, and having freedom and having your health privacy surely are quite vital to that. Thank you so much for joining us. Laurence Fox, leader of the Reclaim Party.